Lynn, I'm going to veer slightly away from some of the questions on economy to address a question that was submitted by a well-known historian and author from the East Coast. But it also, I mean, I'm going to kind of make it a composite question because we have gotten so many questions in on this particular issue. And he says, Mr. LaRouche, one of the things that I fear most in the immediate weeks ahead is the social ramifications or constitutional ramifications, if you will, of the course that I see this president taking. First, on the question of health care, it seems increasingly to be the consensus that this administration, aside from the fact that they've proposed a monstrous policy that nobody really seems able to support, that they are determined to get it through. And they have talked openly of the use of the parliamentary technique of reconciliation to force a yes vote on their health care reform package. If they do this, the likely result will be an explosion both in the Congress and among the American people. Secondarily, President Obama has made clear and has stated explicitly that he need not obey laws as written. This is the echo of the Bush signing statements. He has identified many areas where he need not comply with the law as written. But one of the key areas of this is the question of restrictions on putting troops under UN command and placing troops. There is a simmering situation in the U.S. around the question of the increase of troops in Afghanistan. People read these headlines with dread, and this has only been overshadowed by the debate on health care. But the fact of the matter is that we have never had any debate on what U.S. policy toward Afghanistan would be. Yet even so, it does indeed appear that this president is going to commit more troops and that this president is going to broaden the war effort in Afghanistan. Again, I fear that if he does this, and I believe that he will, that this will lead to a complete explosion, both among liberals and progressives, but also among certain layers of the Republican Party. Now, you are forewarning of a crisis of unprecedented proportions as we enter the final phase of the breakdown of this financial system. Under these conditions, to have a president who takes steps like these, steps that do not gain the confidence and trust of the American people, but in fact undermine it, really does worry me. This is no time for us to have a constitutional crisis. Yet, every sign would tend to indicate that this is the way we are proceeding. My question to you may be somewhat rhetorical, but this president seems to be obsessed with his standing and with his popularity. Isn't there some way that this can be leveraged so that he will cut out this kind of insane behavior? He is undermining his ability to govern in a crisis, and that crisis is clearly at our doorstep. Would you please comment?
Well, if it becomes a test between the survival of the United States and the incumbency of this president, guess which way I vote? It's that simple. I mean, this is what we're in real history now. People have studied anecdotal history for so long that they don't know real history because they don't understand it. They think of it in statistical terms or narrative terms. They don't understand the pulsations which underlie the surface of the behavior of humanity. They don't understand human beings. They don't understand human culture, really. And this has become worse because we've come at a time where classical culture disappeared. It was outlawed at the end of World War II by Truman and company, by Churchill and company. You know, the point which I make extensively in this latest publication, which I've completed, is the essential thing that differentiates a human being from an animal is not mathematics. I think we could train an ape to do most of the kinds of mathematics that I've run into these days. The distinction of a human being is the creative powers of human being, which lie in classical artistic composition. This is particularly true in the case, when you look at the case of classical musical composition, classical poetry, and scientific creativity. I often use the case of Albert Einstein and the relationship of his violin to his creativity in mathematical physics. Is the essence of creativity lies in a quality which is called inspiration, not mathematics. A mathematician is a stupid person, as long as they remain a mathematician. But it's only when they take the organization of the material before their consideration and are inspired to see something beyond that as being an efficient force, an efficient characteristic of this, that you get what we call creativity, the effect of creativity, including scientific creativity. And the problem here is that we lose sight of that. We lose sight of the role of creativity or the moods which are associated with creativity in a population. This is the way a dynamics works. So it's what Shelley is describing in his A Defense of Poetry, is that there's a power which is specifically human, specific to human beings, a power of dynamics, of the superiority of dynamics in the character of the human being. And the human being operates on the basis of the imagination, but does not trust the imagination as such, but tests the imagination against what is feasible in reality. That's creativity. And from that we discuss principles which underlie, like the principle of the distinction between non-living beings and living ones, the qualitative distinction between human beings and animals or other forms of life. And these are three principles: the non-living, the living, and the human, the cognitive. Three universal principles that we know. And within that framework, we challenge our own powers of imagination, as Einstein did, with long sessions with his violin. He was a gifted amateur violinist. And when it was struck by the imagination with a concept to say, is this feasible? Then he went back to the laboratory to think it out and work it out. And from the experience of testing the powers of the imagination against reality is where creativity occurs. And this occurs in all good people who think that way, but it occurs especially in the people at large when they're sufficiently challenged. When they say, isn't there something better than this? Isn't this wrong? And then in their imagination, they try to imagine the alternative, to see what's wrong, to imagine what could cause this. Why could I behave so stupidly? Why did I make that stupid mistake? Why did so-and-so make that stupid mistake? Why did we elect that jerk? And it's in those kinds of inspiration by the powers of the imagination, as disciplined and tested against experimental reality, that we get out of these kinds of messes. We're at a point now where the American people, those who are the over 60%, who have certified that they want this president and this Congress out. I would say that about 80% of the members of Congress today are ready for the chop in the next available election, as it stands today. They want no part of them. They've made it very clear. And they've terrified the Congress out there in the month of August by just this fact. They don't want these guys anymore. They stink. They're traitors. They can't be trusted. You vote for them, and they go out and they vote against you. They betray you every time and say, we had to kiss the butt of the president, or something like that, which is a terrible idea. And that's where the problem lies. And the solution lies. The solution lies, we are going to have to do what we have to do. But what we're going to do is what we're going to do in the imagination first. And we're going to test the fruits of the imagination against the reality. And we're going to look at our neighbors and friends, and we're going to say, this was my imagination. Am I crazy or am I right? And the friends, if they say yes, they're going to go to the next guy. Is this just us, or are we right? And so on. And that process radiates through the population very rapidly. And out of this, very sudden changes and sweeping changes have occurred often in human history, sometimes not often enough. But it's not for me to decide. It's for me, my authority is extended to what I know is the present state of affairs. And at that, I'm fairly confident, particularly the competition is rather poor these days. On the other hand, what I should do is limited by my perception of what the American people in particular are disposed to do, and what I think and what they think the consequences of doing that might be. So I don't go too far. I tell this president, okay, you bum, get in your office and take a few lessons from me, and we'll work something out for you so you stay in office and we don't have to put the nation through an impeachment process. However, if you don't go along with this, I can say that we're going to head toward the inevitability of a very nasty impeachment process, and very soon. Mr. President, you have a few days to decide, because I think that when the month of August reaches, and when all the bankrupt states of the 50 states of the nation are arranged, and there's no means to pay, and the nation states are collapsing in their economy, the national credit is collapsing, and a chain reaction collapses extended throughout the planet, and the planet is going into chaos as a Christmas tree gift, then I think something will happen. And I think the disposition will be, get that guy out of here, and take about 80% of the Congress with him.